Welcome to the Unlist. This is episode 40, and for some of you, this is episode 40.1 because I actually did a version of this episode already and uploaded it, and if you watch that version, then I apologize for making you watch it again because that original version, while fun to make, left some key bits of information out concerning the topic of the video. And I'm the kind of person that if I learn something that's not widely known, I'm not keeping that to myself. I want to share that. I want everyone, not very many of you follow me, of course, but I want everyone that follows me to know what I know, okay? I do not gatekeep. I am the opposite. I will shove that information down your throat, okay? That's just what I do. I'm the anti-gatekeeper. I want everyone to know what I know, okay? So here I am redoing the video. This is going to be hopefully the definitive version of episode 40 because this is now like the 6th time I've made it because that previous upload was like take 5, all right? Not the candy bar take 5, mind you, but just take 5 of that video. Here we are on take 6. Hopefully this is the fast and furious edition of that other video since I can condense some things. For those of you who watched that video, I can take a lot of that irrelevant stuff out and condense the important stuff. Anyway, here goes. So episode 40 is all about a special little fragrance that was once a massive hype beast in the online fragrance community. It's a former hype beast. So it is not talked about as much as it once was. People still do talk about it occasionally. It's not forgotten. I wouldn't call it obscure necessarily either, but it just has come off the pedestal. It is not put up on the pedestal anymore. People aren't going Kali Ma Shakti Day like in, freaking Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom. They're not doing that. No one's getting sacrificed and pushed into a pit of lava over this fragrance. But 10 years ago, oh yeah, 10 years ago, folks were ripping out hearts and all that fun stuff over this fragrance. It was getting pretty gruesome. Like that movie is pretty gruesome. It also is a very bad depiction of that particular culture in that movie. I'll let you decide if you've seen Temple of Doom, whether it's aged poorly or not. I think it's aged really poorly, but, like most old media, you have to kind of watch it with a grain of salt. You can't hold modern standards to it or it just, it invalidates it. But anyway, back on topic here. So, Ralph Lauren Purple Label. Very special fragrance. Formerly a venerated, worshipped fragrance, but not anymore. 10 years ago, it probably peaked in terms of the insanity that surrounds it. Now, why that is part of the information I have to correct, okay? Part of me steering the ship away from the iceberg, all right? We are not the Titanic, we're not going down. So, Purple Label was launched 20 years ago, which is crazy when you smell this fragrance, and I'm wearing it right now. When you smell this fragrance, you don't think it's 20 years old. You have a hard time believing that something like this is 2 decades old, but that is how cutting edge this fragrance was. But at the same time, that very cutting edge nature was held back by the sheer exclusivity of it, you see. So for being this massively future-proof, forward-thinking fragrance, very few people actually had it. And so many people didn't have it and didn't have official access to it that this drove some of the frenzy, some of the hype, because people always want what they can't have, especially in the online fragrance community. The frag bros love their trophies. They love their brag-worthy things. They'd be like, yeah, I got 15 bottles of that, and I stack them in a pyramid, and I photograph it, and I put it on Instagram because I'm an idiot, right? So people love doing that sort of thing, and this fragrance was not exempt from that due to how exclusive. Now, I don't think people had 15 bottles of this stacked in a pyramid like vintage Koros. They weren't going that far down the psychotic rabbit hole, but they were still people were spending pretty big bucks on this because they couldn't get it through official channels, so they had to go through resellers. And the resellers were the ones going to the official locations where it was sold and buying it in person and buying 3 or 4 or 5 of it, whatever the limit per customer was allowed, and then flipping the extra ones on eBay. I guess Etsy was around back then. This is late 2000s to the early 2010s, like I said, right when the hype peaked on this, people were making some bank flipping this fragrance, which was pretty sad, actually. So what's the big deal then? Why is Purple Label so forward thinking? Why was it such a hype monger that it no longer is now? Well, you have to understand what the Purple Label actually is. So Ralph Lauren is an American designer, and he's most known for his polo and sport apparel. So the polo shirts, you know, the cargo shorts, that sort of thing. But he started out, much like Calvin Klein did, he started out with suits. He started out as a tailor. Both Calvin Klein and Ralph Lauren were into sartorial clothes before they went into more ready-to-wear casual stuff. And that ready-to-wear stuff, which is what the polo line was, is where he made all of his success. So he wanted to kind of go back to his roots. And he already had Ralph Lauren suits, okay? They already had Ralph Lauren sartorial wear, but it was on the same level as, like, you know, a Joseph A. Bank or a Men's Warehouse or an Indochino, where they were all ready to made, and, you know, ready to wear rather, ready made, ready to wear, and then you could have them adjusted by a tailor after you bought them, but they were just hanging up on a shelf, right? They were on a rack. They weren't. It wasn't like Savile Row, where you had it done bespoke for you. They measured you and then created an entirely new suit from scratch just from reams of fabric. It wasn't done like that. Purple Label was kind of in between. So Purple Label was the new high-end suit for Ralph Lauren, introduced in the late 90s, okay? And it's called Purple Label because it has a purple label somewhere on the suit. And the vertical pinstripes, which were the most common pattern for the Purple Label suits when they first came out. Kind of jockeying Armani style a little bit there, but that's okay, you know. Plenty of Italians in New York, and Ralph Lauren is from New York anyway. So, and then of course the thing was, these suits weren't made bespoke, but they weren't sold ready to wear either. They were somewhere in between, where you had to order the suit, and then they would have pre-assembled pieces already that they would then make the suit on premises by just, I guess, connecting the pieces. So maybe they had, you know, sport coats and they had slacks and whatever else on hand in the back, and then they would just take them in and adjust them before giving it to you. So in other words, when you got the suit, it was already custom fitted to you. So it was almost like in between an actual restaurant, you know, like an actual high-end, like a Zagat rated restaurant, and like Applebee's, somewhere in the middle. So it's better than casual dining, but it's not going to cost you $300 a plate. So Purple Label was kind of that, you know, not Savile Row, okay, not Richard James, but also not Men's Warehouse either. It's in the middle. Still expensive. I mean, every bit as much money as an Armani suit would cost you. So, I mean, you paid good money for the Purple Label suits, and then you had the shirts and the ties and the shoes and the socks and all that fun stuff, and they were all purple or black or silver because that was the motif of the brand, purple, black, silver. And then they released the fragrance in 2003, and the idea was, when you're in the Ralph Lauren boutique, because you could only get these at the boutique, you were at the standalone Ralph Lauren boutique in one of 6 locations originally. Only 6 boutiques were spec'd out with Purple Label, and 2 of them were in the United States, LA and New York, of course. The other 4 were scattered around the world. So there were only 6 places you could even get Purple Label stuff, which includes the fragrance. But while you're in there getting your suit made to order, but not really, but, you know, made to order, you would fill your cart or bag or whatever full of other Purple Label goodies, including the fragrance. And the fragrance actually came in a box that looks like one of the finished suits. It has the pinstripe pattern, and it has a cloth embroidered Purple Label, the same one that you will find on the back of the sport coats or the back of whatever, the same one you'll find in the pockets. This is the actual Ralph Lauren Purple Label, hence the name Purple Label, that's used when you buy one of those pieces of clothing. Now, this fragrance in 2003 must have been the future. I mean, and you think about how exclusive it was. one of 6 locations before online retail. Amazon was just a baby in 2003. eBay was also just a baby, if it was even out yet, in 2003, okay? So, one of 6 physical retail locations, the only way you can buy this. It retailed for $125, which is pretty close to Creed prices. Creed was about $200 in 2003, $175, $185. So this being at $125 in 2003 was pretty up there for a designer, okay? But that's how exclusive it was. And, you know, obviously the online fragrance community was also very nascent in 2003, which is why the hype for this didn't ratchet up until the late 2000s, early 2010s, because it took time for the online community itself to actually build up. Base Notes was 3 or 4 years old in 2003. For Grantico wasn't even a thing yet. Facebook and Twitter. We had MySpace in 2003, okay? We had our best friend Tom on MySpace. That's what we had. He was everyone's best friend. I don't know what he's doing now, but living his best life, clearly. He's no longer running MySpace. No longer my best friend. Miss you, Tom. Wish you would come back. So, this fragrance, once word of it spread, as the community grew, its legend grew taller and taller and taller. And it became that one Ralph Lauren fragrance that you couldn't have. Because you could have Polo Blue and Polo Sport and Polo Green and any of the other Ralph Lauren fragrances, Safari, Romance was out back then. It wasn't discontinued. You could have Romance, you could have Romance Silver, but you couldn't have Purple Label because you had to go to New York or LA, or I imagine probably London and Paris, and then 2 other locations. Maybe one of them was Moscow in Russia, and maybe Tokyo in Japan, or maybe it was Milan or something, or Rome. But if you weren't in one of those 6 places, you weren't getting a bottle of this. Eventually that increased to 12. So it got democratized out to 12 locations, and then eventually, once Ralph Lauren set up online shop, you could buy it online. If your country had access to RalphLauren.com. Not every country had access to RalphLauren.com, so it was still pretty exclusive. You would not find this in department stores. You wouldn't find it in Macy's, you wouldn't find it in Bon-Ton, you wouldn't find it in Boscov's or Kohl's or any of those mid-tier places, which is funny because Macy's for the longest time had the exclusive rights to all Ralph Lauren fragrances. They were exclusive to Macy's, which is why you didn't even see Polo at like Nordstrom and stuff, and JCPenney. You didn't, you know, had to go to Macy's. But not even Macy's had Purple Label. Nope. Only the boutiques, and then the online. Then, again, things cracked open a little wider because Ralph Lauren let the biggest, most luxurious single department stores, not chains, but only one location, the most luxurious, high-end single department stores were allowed to start carrying Purple Label. So that meant Harrods in the UK, that meant Le Bon Marché in Paris, that meant Gum in Moscow, that meant Bloomingdale's in Chicago, Bergdorf Goodman in New York City. Okay. Neiman Marcus, no, they had chains. Nordstrom, no, they had chains. Saks Fifth Avenue, no, chains. So even though those are still very high-end stores, more than one store, can't have it. Exclusive, exclusive, all about exclusive. Meanwhile, the price actually never went up. It stayed $125. Even after inflation made everything more expensive and whatever, into the 2010s, and now here we are 2023, the fragrance still, to this day, retails for $125, still. Which is kind of cool, because now most of your average designers float around $105, $125. So Ralph Lauren Purple Label has now kind of joined the rank and file, price-wise. It's now like just about the price of a typical Hermes fragrance. I think some Hermes cost more than this. Does. And then this year, just this year, it got pushed out further. Now Neiman Marcus is allowed to have it. Saks Fifth Avenue is allowed to have it. Nordstrom, which is how I got it, Nordstrom is allowed to have it. You still won't find it in your mid-tier stores though, so no Boscov's, no Macy's, no JCPenney. Sorry guys. But those plebeian department stores, aren't allowed to have the purple label. So it's slowly being democratized over time. It's being padded out. But I also feel like the nature of the luxury market in general is starting to, they no longer use location for exclusivity, they use price point. So luxury goods are now more available in more spaces worldwide than they've ever been previously, but they're much more expensive. So you can buy Chanel bags anywhere, but they're all like 20 grand a piece, right? So they no longer use the physical location to maintain exclusivity. They just use that you can't afford this. They use money now. They use literal price to maintain exclusivity. But they haven't really done that with this. Again, this is still just just 125. That's still high, okay? Let's be honest here. And you can't get this discounted anywhere because of how limited distribution. This is not third-party distributed. One of the reasons why it's still so hard to get, Ralph Lauren distributes this themselves, okay? So no online discounters, okay? No Beauty Encounter, no Fragrance Net, no Fragrance X, no Fragrance Buy, no perfume.com, no Perfume Online Canada, no Nose, no Notino, sorry guys, no Beauty French, not happening. Okay, so it's actually harder to find a bottle of this than to find a bottle of Creed, right? Even though Creed is 3 times the price. This is harder to find. This is technically more rare than a bottle of Creed, even though it's much less expensive. Now let's get down to the smell, which the smell is part of the massive hype behind this fragrance. When this came out in 2003, there was nothing like it. And very few people actually smelled it, so no one really realized how unique it was. Now, the nose for this fragrance has never officially been revealed, but I am friends with the guy who made this perfume. So, which I didn't know I was friends with him until after I made the original version of this video, which is why I had to redo the video, because he hit me in my DMs and said, hey, I made that fragrance. So, and I'm talking about none other than Harry Fremont, okay? So he was like, I saw you did a purple label video and you said you didn't know the perfumer. Well, guess what? I'm the perfumer. And he actually said that this is his favorite creation. This is his single most favorite creation of his entire career. And he goes back to the 80s, right? So think about that. He's done a lot of stuff. He's done CK1 with Abrita Marias. He's done New West. Okay, he's done lots of things. And this is his favorite fragrance. Okay, so he said that he actually made 3 versions of this fragrance, and he spent the most amount of time. He spent 5 years working on this. 5 years working on this. And there were 3 different versions, and this is the one that Ralph Lauren ultimately picked. But they didn't want to credit him, which is why you won't see his name anywhere. They didn't want to credit him because they wanted to do the whole Creed thing and pretend that they made it. We made our own fragrance. Ralph Lauren himself sat down and made this fragrance for you. That's how exclusive it is. Of course, that's all just BS, right? Ralph Lauren doesn't know how to make perfumes. But that's the thing. They didn't want to reveal the perfumer. They wanted it to be so exclusive and secretive and all this other stuff. So now let me show you what the bottle looks like. You pull this off. It's like a cell phone, right? It's like you're buying a brand new Samsung Galaxy phone. You pull the top of the box off, the flap opens, but instead of a phone, out comes a bottle. Okay, out comes this bottle. Now, for those of you vintage guys, you might actually recognize this bottle. This is the same bottle that Monogram in the 80s used. The only difference being that Monogram was a blue bottle and had an RL logo in the middle, and then you could etch the top, you could get it engraved. Well, that fragrance only lasted 2 years on the market, so it became a super, ultra, mega, super duper unicorn, so a supercorn, okay? Having a bottle of that fragrance is basically like having gold bullion now, okay? You can put your kids through college with a bottle of that. But, you know, it only was on the market for 2 years, and that's why. That's why it's so rare. This is not exactly the same. Of course, it's purple. It's a little more plasticky, too. I think this was metal on the Monogram bottle, but it has the RL right there, which is kind of cool. Now, yeah, you see it? Yeah, the RL. So this smells, and I'm wearing it now. This smells like a very modern leather fragrance, like a leather fragrance that you would see now in 2023. All right. In fact, we've seen more recent fragrances do this particular type of leather. You know, one of those is Mont Blanc Explorer, which is probably why people compare this to Aventus, and why when it peaked in popularity in 2013 or so, everyone was saying run out and get this because it's like Aventus but older and better. It's not. And Harry Fremont knows of these comparisons too, and he never understood it either, because this is a leather fragrance. He very clearly stated this is a leather fragrance. It's not ambroxan and vanilla. It's not that pseudo chypre thing, all right? It's not that. This has leather compounds in it, but it's just so smooth and so dry. And it uses the blackberry / black currant fruity top note to really just get you into the leather. It's a very quick little, it's here, it's gone. Mandarin orange, some muted spices, some berry flavors, but very dry, like I said, like a can of LaCroix, very dry, not sweetened berry at all. Just very dry berry, slides you right on into the clary sage and right on into the leather, okay? And the musk profile and the woody profile. And it's got a little bit of tobacco in there as well, okay? So it might remind you a little bit of some of his other work where he plays with dry tobacco materials. It's not quite like Michael from Men, it's not quite like that, but it's a similar feel with that. But nowhere in there do you find birch tar. Nowhere in there do you find vanilla in the same level quantity. Nowhere do you find any ambroxan. There's patchouli in this though, okay? So, I mean, I can understand where somebody with a more limited palate, and yeah, this might sound like a dig, but it's the cold, hard truth. I may understand where someone with a limited palate may go, okay, this smells like Aventus. But if you have a much wider understanding of fragrances and you've smelled a lot more fragrances than just whatever the latest top 10 list is, which, you know, I ignore those anyway, you'll actually spot way more similarities to other fragrances, like Versace Man, okay, like Baldessarini, like Mont Blanc Explorer, which wouldn't come out until 2019, all right? I want to say Purple Label actually compares more to those than it does to Creed Aventus, but, you know, people are going to be stupid, so say what you want to say. This started to lose popularity once actual Aventus clones, that's the kicker here. Once actual Aventus clones became more commonly available. So Club de Nuit Intense, Rayanne Insurrection 2, stuff like that. The various Ajmal clones, the various Al Haramain clones. Once those hit the market, then people no longer needed to chase this anymore, because this was still hard to get and still exclusive. Cheaper than Aventus, but still very hard to get. So the hysteria for this kind of died away. And I remember the people who bought this, and they spent big bucks because they bought it on eBay, they bought it from a reseller, they paid $300 for it, and then they had a knee jerk. And this is the part I will end the video on, because this part always kills me. But they had the knee jerk where they don't exactly know if they like it or not, but then they gaslight themselves. This is a sickness that I don't understand within the fragrance community. They gaslight themselves. Oh, my nose is not sophisticated enough. Oh, my taste is not broad enough. I need to keep smelling this until I eventually convince myself that I like it. Don't do that. Don't do that. If you spend a lot of money on a rare fragrance and you end up not liking it, oh well, you don't like it. Sell it, give it away, trade it. Don't sit there and force yourself to like it. Don't force feed yourself liver until you like liver. That's just weird, okay? Don't do that. And people did that with this fragrance. Now, I love this fragrance, okay? But I genuinely love it, and I loved it from day one. I didn't have to make myself like it. So just don't do that, guys. That is weird. That is harmful, psychologically damaging, and it's unhealthy. So, okay, guys. That's been the new revised version of the Purple Label video. Hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, this is a fruity leather fragrance, very unique. 20 years ago, it was something special, and in my opinion, it's still special even today. And hope you enjoyed it. Have a good weekend, and this will hopefully be the definitive version of this video. Bye-bye.